Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. As hybrid threats intensify across Europe, Poland has arrested a foreign military intelligence officer accused of spying on its territory and allied structures. With espionage, sabotage and Russian-directed influence operations on the rise, questions grow about how NATO states can secure themselves. Joining us today is Reuben F. Johnson. He's a military expert and correspondent for Breaking Defence, the world's largest news organisation dedicated to defence, to help us unpack the significance of this latest arrest and the evolving landscape of modern espionage in Europe. Mr. Johnson, welcome back. Good to see you again.
Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure as always, sir. Right, so, espionage, nothing new. It's been going on since time immemorial, but something has changed. You can feel it in the air. What's going on and why now?
Well, we're seeing the internationalization of Russian efforts against NATO and against Ukraine. So this foreign military intelligence officer has been arrested. They said he came from an Asian country that was created by the breakup of the Soviet Union. So that's one of the stands, as we call them. We don't know which one. I could guess, but that's all it would be. But this, I remind everyone, look at the things that we've seen so far. First of all, we've seen North Korea, Laos, and other countries sending troops to Ukraine to fight with the Russian army. We have seen some Chinese agents who were arrested in Ukraine because they were trying to elicit classified information about the Neptune anti-ship surface attack missile. Now, for those who don't remember, the Neptune was a missile that was used to sink the Moskva, the flagship of the Black Fleet in April of 2022. And so now this. And then, of course, just a few days ago, there were 32 people picked up who were from a variety of countries.
In Poland?
In Poland.
Yeah.
Now, that's the other aspect. This is all about trying to bring Poland into this conflict in a way where Poland will be forced to say, okay, that's it. That's an Article 5 violation. But have it be something that would be questionable so that the French and the Germans can look at their shoes and say, no, that's not quite it. So those are the two things that I see that are happening. And,
right.
And in the meantime, everything's being done possible to weaken the war effort by the West and strengthen the war effort by Russia.
Right. Okay, so a few points you raised there. Let's start with the Article 5. I'm assuming you're referring to the article which triggers the NATO clause. Attack on one is an attack on all NATO members. And this brings into focus the question of, well, how do we define attack? Are we saying, or are you saying at the moment, that an attack is I don't know, espionage or not, sabotage or not, or a combination of the two? Does that become attack? Where's the line?
Well, that's a really good question. I go to a lot of conferences where people ask that question. They ask it about actual physical espionage or sabotage. I've even heard the question asked multiple times that when does a cyber attack rise to the level where a kinetic response is required or would be the only proper response. And the Russians are always constantly looking for, if you remember, more than a week ago, there was an attack on the Ukrainian city of Vinnytsia. And there was a plant in the city owned by the wealthiest man in Poland, a company that makes wooden flooring. Barnalek, I think is the name. I'm trying to remember the name of the company, but okay. Now, that was not a stray drone or a stray missile. We looked at the radar tracks. There were 3 separate drones coming on 3 separate vectors. That plant was hit on purpose because the Russians wanted to see, well, what will Poland do?
Right.
What will the wealthiest man in the country do when his largest plant outside of Poland has been hit and partially destroyed? They're always looking for how some country will react.
So it's a provocation in using a number of probing tactics.
Provocation, but The Russians also practice it's a technique, we call it reflexive control. And reflexive control is how do you do things that can cause your enemy to unknowingly make wrong decisions that are bad for him, but he doesn't realize he's doing it at the time. And this is what they're constantly probing for. They're looking for how institutions will react and how they can deceive the people on the other side.
Right, so they're gathering intelligence simply by looking at the reactions. Right. Now, is Poland being singled out for this kind of treatment, or is it other countries as well in Europe, maybe the US?
I would say Poland is receiving a disproportionate amount of attention and activity on the part of the Russians, partly because it's the one NATO nation that's meeting or actually exceeding the defense spending requirements. It's buying a lot of new kit. It's the staging area for all of the hardware which goes into Ukraine. It's on the border with Belarus, and that's another area where the Russians have tried to cause problems by shoving third world illegal migrants across the border. It's definitely out there on the front, and I would say yes, it's the main target.
It is
at this point.
Understood. Now, in terms of you talk about the internationalization of espionage. We see that in the people that have been caught: Belarusians, Ukrainians, Russians, and now a Colombian, some Chinese.
Right.
You mentioned earlier. How is that working? How do they gather all these disparate groups to achieve their ends?
Well, it's not so much, I would say, gathering all these, but they have people that say, oh, well, I have a certain skill or a certain set of contacts or a certain ability to do something, and if I'm successful, it might be worth some money.
Okay.
And that's how some intelligence services fund themselves. In the case of people like the Cubans, they are entirely, their intelligence services entirely financed by what they can steal and what they can sell to someone else. So not everybody has these huge budgets like the CIA or MI6 and some other people. And then there's just plain old, military intelligence gathering. This foreign military intelligence officer from one of the stands, we believe, well, he was caught, one of the things he was doing, he was caught snooping around Bydgoszcz, which is where WZL number 2 is, which is the main facility for supporting and maintaining the Polish Air Force's fighter aircraft. So not surprised that someone would be snooping around there, but so this is a constant game, and the Russians and others take advantage of the fact that this is not Russia. You don't have to be registered at every single place that you go. There's not people following you all the time. There's not some spyware on your phone that tells them where you always are, et cetera, et cetera. They take advantage of the fact that it's the West, it's a democracy, it's supposed to be open, it's supposed to be free. And while that is our greatest strength, sometimes it can be a weakness.
It's exploited.
Yeah.
So what does that tell us about the level of security against these threats as we learn more and more about how they're evolving? You mentioned Bydgoszcz. Should there simply have been more people around to stop this from happening in the first place? I don't think you can. We don't print enough money to have enough people to do that. Right.
I mean, it's more about when people cross the border. Are they being tracked? Is someone aware of them? If this is someone who is known to some intelligence service somewhere, is his data being passed along to someone else? And the Russians are always looking for where is the path of least resistance. So just to give an example, when the war began, there were a lot of sanctions that were slapped on the Russians, and European EU countries could not do business with Russia. So Germany said, oh, okay, we're being great members of the alliance. We're going to obey all the restrictions. So trade from Russia, to Russia from Germany, trade from Germany to Russia decreased by 60%. But then a funny thing happened. Trade from Russia to Kyrgyzstan increased by 2,000%. And then if you started looking at the customs data, which can be accessed openly, you saw that there was a list of items that supposedly went to Kyrgyzstan, and then when you looked at the Kyrgyzstan data, there was a big chunk of it that never got there.
Right.
So that's That's what I mean. They're always looking for a way that they
sidestepping
yes.
the sanctions. Right. Now, OK, so there aren't enough people to watch every possible. But is there a way that Poland in particular, but NATO countries in general, can use AI, for example, technology, to further insulate themselves from this kind of threat?
Well, not just AI, but also face recognition.
Right.
I mean, that technology exists. If you go to a place like the United Arab Emirates, for example, and by the way, most of the technology they're using is Israeli.
Yeah.
But from the time you get off the plane and you pass through passport control, if they want to, they can track your every movement. And this is all done by some very sophisticated networks using facial recognition, using very small hidden cameras and so on, looking at your phone, because when you carry a phone with you, you're basically transmitting all the time. It's all doable.
Right. So maybe we just need to be doing more of it.
More of it, but I don't want us to become like China.
No, quite.
Or someplace, where there's absolutely no privacy at all.
It's always a double-edged sword, isn't it? It
Yeah.
has to be done with proper control. Unfortunately, Mr. Johnson, as always, it's too short a time that we spend together, but we do have to call an end to our conversation today. Please come back again soon.
Be glad to. Thank you for having me again.
Thank you.
Sir.
It was a pleasure. And that brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away, there are lots more coming up. Goodbye.